Hi, I'm Dr. Ransom. I teach saxophone lessons. Ferling 42. In this video, I'll cover the key signature, alternate fingerings, time signature, tonguing, and dynamics. There is a lot more to this etude that I won't cover here. This is really just to get you started. For more detailed study, you should get a private lesson with a professional, such as myself. And I would be happy to sign you up for any number of lessons that you want. Just send me an email to brian@briansaxophoneransom.com, and that email address is also in the description below. Real quick before we get started, you should write in the measure numbers the way I have shown here. That way, whenever I mention a particular measure, you'll be able to find it quickly. The first thing everyone notices is that dang key signature. Well, if you know your D-flat major scale, then it's really not too bad. If you don't know that your D-flat major scale, that's got to come first. Notice that the G-flats are marked forked fingering. Forked G-flat is enharmonically the same as forked F-sharp. Sight reading this etude can be intimidating, but I learned a tip from one of my students who played it really well the very first time. I asked him how he did that so easily, and he said he just assumed that with all those flats in the key signature, every note was flat, except of course for C and F. I thought that made a lot of sense. The trick is to go slow enough the first time and read every note, and that's really slow. And if you don't miss any notes the first time, then you won't miss any notes the second time or the third time, and that's how you set yourself up for a perfect performance in the end. Now, the thing is that not every G-flat in this etude is forked. Here's a copy with all the forked G-flats marked. You may notice that the forked G-flats generally occur in scale passages, while normal G-flat fingerings are better for arpeggios. Please mark these on your copy. I promise it'll be worth it. Now let's look at the B-flat fingerings. In the D-flat major scale, you should use bis B-flat. Same goes for this etude, with a couple of exceptions. The first B-flat in measure 29 will not work very well if you try to use side B-flat or bis B-flat. Luckily, the saxophone comes equipped with another option. If you press the first finger on the left hand, that's the B key, and the second finger on the right hand, the F-sharp key, you'll get a B-flat. That's because all three of the right hand keys are connected to the bis key. Some saxophonists refer to this as 1 and 5 because you use the first pearl key and the fifth pearl key. Well, my brain doesn't work that way. I think of 3 fingers on each hand, and I call them 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So I call the fingering 1 and 2. The reason you use this fingering in measure 29 is that the note before the B flat is a B natural, although it is written as a C flat, but it fingers as a B natural, and harmonic. Then following the B flat is a low D flat. I have found that the combination of these 3 notes, C flat, B flat, low D flat, is easy using this 1 and 2 B flat fingering, and it works better for me than any other B flat fingering. Of course, you can, if you prefer, use 1 and 1, or 1 and all 3 right hand fingers for that B flat. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. A similar note combination occurs in measure 55, so that would also use that same B flat fingering. There's another reason to learn this 1 and 2 B flat fingering and get used to it, and that is that it gets used a lot in Ferling number 16, which just happens to also be on this year's Texas All-State list. So you might as well practice using it every time it's marked. It will feel awkward at first, but that doesn't matter. I mean, everything you ever learned on saxophone was awkward at first. Remember the first time you held the saxophone on your lap? Yeah, it felt really weird, didn't it? But you got used to it. Let's talk about the time signature. It says 3/4, but the tempo says dotted half note equals 96. Ferling has a lot of issues with tempo markings and time signatures. The tempo marking should indicate the beat unit. That's the note value that gets the beat. So the tempo says the beat unit is a dotted half note, but the time signature says the beat unit is a quarter note. 3/4 time literally means there's 3 beats in a measure and the quarter note gets the beat. I know there are tons of examples of tempo markings in music that don't match the time signature, and especially in Ferling etudes. But the way we all learned it in band class doesn't really explain what it means, so it leaves a lot of young students very confused. You'd think there would be a better way to learn how to count this stuff. Okay, so when you first start learning this etude, you can count in 3/4 time, 1 tay, 2 tay, 3 tay, and so on. Then as you go faster and faster and your tempo gets up around 120, you can convert that over to counting each measure as a single beat. So what you do now is set your metronome to 40 beats per minute. And so now it's clicking 1 time for each measure. Now you can set the subdivision to triplets. Okay, it's not really triplets, but it's the only way to set the metronome for this time signature because each measure subdivides by 3. Then a little at a time, work your way up to between 80 and 96 beats per minute, or as fast as you can get it without a bunch of mistakes. Hey, if you go slow at first and do enough repetitions, you can eventually go as fast as you want. Tonguing. You should tongue exactly where it says. Ferling makes a real challenge out of the articulation patterns, so don't ignore it and just slur everything. That's called being inarticulate. I don't necessarily recommend a light tongue, but just a good clear tongue. And you don't have to worry about playing staccato or lifting or stop tonguing or any of that, because at a fast speed, those things don't really apply. If you use the tip of your tongue, you can get a crisper and cleaner sounding articulation, although that is not 100% true, as everyone's tongue is different. You have to listen. It's even better if you record yourself and listen to that. But don't use your iPhone's voice memos to record because that app processes the sound and ruins it. The camera video app works pretty well. Or if you don't want to go through all that trouble, you can just play facing a smooth wall and the wall will reflect your sound back to you and give you a pretty good idea what you really sound like. That's an old school trick. Back to dynamics. You really have to get soft and loud or your performance will be boring. And while there is not that much variety in this etude, there are some easy ways to get more dynamics out of it than what's written on the page. Really, I just mostly try to follow Ferling's suggestions, but I think that most players don't do that, and some don't use dynamics at all. The beginning is marked mezzo forte, which literally means medium strong. The hairpins in measures 2 through 5 is easy because the saxophone naturally does that anyway. The first 16 measures are a pretty steady mezzo forte. You can do some dynamics in there if you want. It can't hurt. And just because nothing is marked doesn't mean you can't do it. Measures 17 through 34 is a pretty long phrase for a single breath, but it's marked piano, so you can play really quiet and make your air last longer. Notice that the dynamic doesn't increase until measure 28. So if you play really soft for the first part of that phrase, you should have plenty of air to crescendo and then finish strong. The next phrase, measures 35 through 46, is forte, but luckily it is also pretty short, so you can really play strong here. Measures 47 to 54 appears to be a repeat of measures 1 through 8, but watch out, the dynamic is not the same. Some of the articulations are different too, and I don't think Ferling did that by mistake. I think it's another challenge. It's also another opportunity for variety, and variety is good. Measure 47 is marked piano, and if you make sure to play really soft and then return to piano after the hairpins in measures 48 to 50, don't increase volume until measure 55 and then only gradually, topping out at forte for the final few measures. So, what I've just outlined is not a complicated dynamic structure, but it does add a lot of variety to an etude that would otherwise be just a bunch of fast notes. And that's called musicianship. Okay, if you found this video helpful and or entertaining, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Thanks for watching.